Peace be to all. I hope everybody's having a beautiful and wonderful day. I'm just tuning in with y'all today to show y'all a recipe that I do for my compost tea. So I had posted it on my social media and a couple of y'all had commented down below. So I just wanted to tune back in kind of quick so that y'all are able to make this compost tea. If you live in Central Texas, you were able to harvest some of the rainwater that just happened because there was a lot of rain that happened. This will be the perfect time because the perfect type of water to use for compost tea is rainwater because it doesn't have any chlorine or any of those chemicals from it, and it's from Mother Nature. So without further ado, we just gonna get straight into the recipe. I also will say that all of these ingredients are not needed, but some of them will just help there be a microbial boost. All right. So right now, I'm just filling up this 5-gallon bucket about halfway with this rainwater from this rainwater catcher that I got. So right here, all I have is like basically some paint strainers or these just mesh bags that you could put it in. You don't need these, it just make it a little bit easier so you don't clog up your air stone. I'm gonna show y'all what an air stone is in a couple minutes, but you can use this just so, like I said, so you don't clog up the air stone. You'll be putting your ingredients inside of this. So the first thing we gonna start with is some vermicompost. And basically what vermicompost is just worm castings. If you have a worm bin or if you're able to source some worm castings, go ahead and start getting those out. So hopefully we finna see if mine doing alright. I ain't checked, well I be checking on them, but I ain't checked on them in about a week. So we gonna see if I got some in here. Yeah, they still in there. They doing their thing. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go all the way to the bottom. I know I'm disturbing them, but I do need these worm castings. So what I'm gonna do after I get these worm castings is have a little bit of fun. I'm gonna kind of pick through and try to get as many of the worms out of it so I don't drown them whenever I put them into this bag. So I recommend you using your own worm castings because you never know where these worm castings are from. A lot of the worm castings are just fed like manure and other ingredients you may not just want to be feeding your worms. You could feed them manure if that's what you have, but you know, just up to you. So that's one ingredient right there. Since I have multiple worm castings, I'm not necessarily saying to get this brand, but this is a brand that I mess with. It's Worm Gold Plus. They don't sponsor me or nothing, but I do like what they got going on, and I enjoy using them whenever I use worm castings. So I'll put a little bit of this with it. You actually could use this recipe that I'm using right now and only use this because it already has kelp and rock dust in it. So the kelp is actually a microbe food as well as a nutrient, and then the rock dust is also a microbe food as well as a nutrient. So you got some of that. Then I have these other worm castings. These, I don't necessarily sponsor, will say nothing about the brand. I just got it because it was another kind. And The reason I'm mixing them together is just to maximize the biodiversity. You don't have to mix 3 or 4 different ones. You can use just the one and that will suffice. I do have another one I could put in here, but I'm actually not going to do that this time. All right, so the next ingredient that you want to add is some compost. I suggest that you use your own compost just like everything else. But if you don't have your own compost, just make sure you're sourcing a well broken down compost that doesn't have pathogens or anything bad in it, because you don't want to spread that throughout your garden. Remember that what you're doing right now is going to be multiplying microbes, so you don't want to be multiplying bad microbes. I always recommend you using your own compost. So this is just a little bit of my microgreen compost that I use. So I grow a lot of microgreens, so from that I end up getting a lot of microgreen compost and I end up using that. Sometimes I feed it to the worms so that they have some food. It kind of helps the ecosystem so I don't have as much waste. So these are just a couple things you could use to supercharge the compost tea. You could use the different rock dust. So you could use some rock phosphate, you could add some of that in there, or you could add some azomite. But like I said, I have a brand that already has some rock dust in it, and I don't want to overdo it. You can't necessarily overdo it, but I don't want to waste anything. The only thing I will be adding though is some of this oyster shell, and this just has a little bit of soluble calcium in it. And calcium is good for plants to make them strong. So I want to add some of that to the compost tea. So after you mix this together, you don't have to mix it together because it's all going in the same thing. But after you mix it together, just put it in your bag. Like I said, you don't need all of these ingredients. All you really need is some good worm castings or some good compost. It is just called compost tea. It's not called compost, rock dust, kelp. It's not called all of that tea. It's just called compost tea. Some of these things just help enhance what it got going on. And like I said, part of this recipe is not using molasses. Molasses, something that I learned about it is some microbes like molasses and other microbes don't like molasses. And with that being said, molasses itself can selectively breed for certain microbes. I don't want selective breeding of microbes. I want all the microbes. I want anything that I can get that's beneficial for the garden. So I don't want there to be a super growth of something, and then whenever it goes out into the garden, there's not that same amount of sugar, and then the microbes, they're not happy anymore. So that's why I don't choose to use molasses. Now we're gonna get into the ingredients that we're gonna actually be adding to the water. These are water soluble ingredients, and these are just basically enhancing it. Just like I said, the kelp, it has over 62 vitamins, minerals within the plant, and it also has a lot of hormones within it that help the plant grow whenever it's actually applied to the soil, and the microbes also go crazy for it. So you could add a little bit of that to your compost tea. Just be careful to not add too much. Seaweeds and things, they have a lot of salt in it. You don't want to overdo it, as well as it has a lot of potassium. So you don't want to add too much potassium to your compost tea, and you're making a potassium nutrient that you're adding to your garden, and you're not necessarily accounting for that. So I'm just showing these two. There's a liquid version and then there's a soluble version that you can add to water. Today I'm going to be using some of this soluble version because it's a lot cheaper. I would recommend that if y'all do use some, I would try to find a dry soluble version just because it could take you a whole lot farther than this liquid version. But I'm not saying buy either one of these brands because I really don't care. Just buy something that you think is good and that's ethically sourced. So another thing that you could add is fish fertilizer. So this right here is basically fish protein hydrolysate. It's not fish emulsion, it's harvested a different way. I could make a whole nother video talking about that. I'm not gonna go into all of that, but what it's good for is nitrogen. So this one is pure protein, it's soluble, it's already in a dry state, and you just add it to water and then it'll dissolve in the water. This, it's the same, kind of the same thing, but it's in a liquid state, and like I said, it doesn't go as far. So I don't necessarily recommend either one of these brands, but I would lean more towards this one, and it's at a decent price. So they not sponsoring me, but if y'all see this vid, you know what I'm saying, tap in. So hopefully up until this point I haven't confused any of y'all or tried to overcomplicate the recipe. I just want everybody to know that y'all can make y'all own fertilizer / microbial boost in your garden. You don't have to go out and buy things. The only thing you may have to buy up front is one of these, which is an air pump and some air stones, but these could last you a very, very long time. You're not necessarily brewing compost tea all day, every day. The other thing you may have to buy in the beginning is bags, just the little small bags that you put the stuff in, just so these don't get too dirty on you, because if these clog up, this can be what kind of messes up the investment. If you allow these to clog up, it can mess up everything. Also, bacteria can be harbored within this, so it's just easier to have this. I also choose to use 2 air stones for the reason that I could have one higher up in the water and the other one lower. Different parts of the water receive different amounts of oxygen, so I just want to make sure that the whole 5-gallon bucket has the same amount of oxygen. The other thing is, if you're running a bigger jug, it's better to have more stones. You want to make sure that you have a lot of bubbles going so that those microbes are happy. Just so you know, the alternative for this is not to not use this. If you don't use this, it's no longer compost tea. It turns into a ferment or a green juice, or there are other names for it, but it's no longer a compost tea. Compost tea has aerobic microbes. The other method, if you just put this in a bucket and you let it sit, that would be an anaerobic ferment. So like I said, I don't want to complicate this for anyone. I want everybody to be brewing their own compost tea, but just remember that this is a key component. You can find these for around $40, which isn't a bad upfront investment. And then these air stones you can find as low as $5. So the first thing I'm going to be mixing in is the soluble kelp extract. So like I said, the reason I like to use this is because it goes a lot farther. I'm gonna use a little bit because you don't need that much. So this doesn't need to be measured for this particular compost tea. It doesn't need to be measured that much. Just don't use too much. That's why I have a measuring stick out. If y'all are able to get one, get a measuring stick, because like I said, you don't want to be using too much. Also, if you don't have a measuring device, it can lead to you overusing things, which I have fell victim to. So I'm just doing 1/4 of a teaspoon. I'm actually gonna do, so 1/4 plus 1/4. I'm actually gonna do half a teaspoon for 5 gallons. Doing half a teaspoon for 5 gallons of soluble kelp extract, and then we going in with the protein. The protein, we just gonna go with 1 teaspoon for 5 gallons. Like I said, this is not a fertilizer. This is a compost tea. This is something for the microbes to not only multiply them, but to charge the ones that are already in the soil. And so as y'all see, I didn't fill the 5-gallon bucket all the way up, and that's to account for the bubbling of the water, as well as whenever these things begin to bubble and the microbes become active, there is a foam that will develop. It doesn't always develop, but it can. And so from that, you don't want it to fall over and overflow. So you just want to account for that. So I leave a little bit of space at the top. So you want to find you your favorite stick or just something to hold this up. You don't want this just sitting in the bottom, because like I said, you want air to be able to flow through everything and for the microbes to be able to breathe on every bit. So this will allow it to be suspended in the water and not touch the bottom. And for this device, you need for it to be higher than what is pumping water into. So just get another 5-gallon bucket and just put it right next to it. That's what I do. I have actually a crazy solution in here. It's made for ants. I have put a whole bunch of spicy peppers and stuff in there, just so whenever ants come, I could pour this into it. So that's just what that is. It's just a stand so that could sit on, and so if it does rain or anything, it's not sitting in water. Oh, and if it does plan on raining, don't try to have this outside, because it'll just overflow and then you won't have your microbes anymore. Peace, everyone. So I just wanted to go through a few questions that I didn't answer, like while I was mixing the stuff together and everything. So one of the common questions you may ask is, how long should I brew the compost tea for? So with this recipe, I typically would say anywhere between 24 and 36 hours. The reason you want to brew it for this long is to give the microbes enough time to populate, but you also don't want to necessarily brew it for 2 or 3 days, because sometimes there can be an overpopulation of microbes, and by then they could have eaten everything, they could begin to die, and if they begin to die, it could cause an anaerobic environment, because the microbes don't necessarily want to live in a place where there are dead things. So dead things breed dead things. We want to breed alive things. Another question you may have is, how much may you want to dilute this? So typically what I choose to do is I go about 1 to 3. So if I have a 1-gallon watering can, I do about a third the watering can compost tea, and then the other 2/3 I'll do just rainwater. I also try to make sure that I mix it with rainwater, because I don't want to brew it in just regular I don't want to brew it in rainwater and then mess it up by adding chlorinated water to it. So that's another thing. But it is safe to do a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you do 1 gallon to 1 gallon or 5 gallons to 5 gallons, you can do that. So 5 gallons of compost tea to 5 gallons regular rainwater, you can do that as well. You can also use it as a foliar spray, but just be wary that if you're using it as a foliar spray, you want to strain it out very well. You want to make sure that even though you had that bag, dang, these bugs going crazy already, just after this rain. But right after that, you want to be able to strain it. So if you could strain it so that it doesn't clog up your sprayer, because I have fallen victim to that as well, trying to use it as a foliar spray, and using it as a foliar spray has ended up clogging up a couple sprayers. So you don't want to have to spend money on extra sprayers. Some people may ask whether or not this is an effective method of fertilization or using microbes. All I have to say is I would rather use things that don't have a high upfront cost. I would rather use things that are adapt to where I live, because I'm using my own vermicompost as well as my own compost. I may be using some amendments, but they're not necessary. I would rather be doing that than using my dollar to vote for these pesticides and these chemicals that are going on in this world. I do not believe in putting my money towards these things. Each dollar that you spend towards the nonsense is a vote for them to continue producing the nonsense. So just remember that. It may be effective scientifically or however you may want to look at it, but it works for me. It delivers microbes to my soil. My plants are stronger. I see better disease resistance. I see faster nutrient uptake. So if that's what you want to do, you can do it. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just showing you what I do. Peace. So for all y'all that stayed to the end, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I'm gonna keep coming to y'all with these tips. This year, like I said, I'm doing everything in terms with nature. Even though I would say that's a little bit of electricity and an air pump, at least I can aid nature in what it's gonna do. If y'all wanna do something with nature or do something with y'all garden, just remember that put nature first. Nature doesn't cost $1,000. Nature doesn't cost $100. All nature wants is a little bit of your time and your love. So all I gotta say is, remember it's a beautiful day to garden. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, and love yourself as you love your neighbor. Peace.
Draining all your energy, better pull them like a weed. Undefeated in life, shit, I sprouted like a seed.